If you've been noticing, the witch has been really having a moment with the Me Too movement and the women's marches around the world. Systemic sexism is being addressed like never before in the mainstream media and for many of us in our own personal and professional lives. So in this context, I believe that witches and feminism right now are rising together for a reason, and to understand the sexism women and folks on the feminine spectrum face today and the cultural response to it, examining the misogyny that drove the witch hunt centuries ago can help illuminate its brutal origins and perhaps even offer liberation from this cycle of abuse.
It's like oppression is the thing that makes us want to apologize for our humanity. It says something's wrong with you because you are not whatever we have decided is supreme. And so then you spend your time all the time like, I'm so sorry that I'm Black and taking up space, or I'm a woman and I need to have my period. I'm so sorry. And it's like, no, fuck, I bleed, and that's where life comes from. That's unapologetic, right? I'm like, you're lucky that I bleed. You should be worshiping and gathering this blood and like putting it on all your plants or something. Like it's that good, right?
As cultural historian Rianne Eisler theorizes in The Chalice and the Blade, if we read the Bible as normative social literature, the absence of the goddess is the single most important statement about the kind of social order that the men who over many centuries wrote and rewrote this religious document strove to establish and uphold. But again, a lack of holy women, an origin story of the first woman as corrupter, sets the stage for the witch. And tied up into this tale, we have two themes, basically women persecuted and punished for having knowledge and or desire. And this common thread comes up in the witch hunts over and over again.
I think it's really important that we revisit these stories, both because there were many voices that were silenced in the original versions. There were, women who were silenced. There were the slaves were almost always silenced in sort of the original tellings. And for those of us who grew up with these stories or didn't grow up with them also, I think it's really important to go back and sort of open the text up and challenge the text. And then there's also the fact that over the years, people have sort of started muting certain things.
I remember this one class, my 20th century history class. When we read about the Russian Revolution, we read 3 different books, 3 different sources. And then I didn't completely think of it the same way that I think of it now, but it's this idea of incomplete stories will lead to incomplete solutions. And if we're telling an incomplete story about struggles of Black folk, struggles of humanity, struggles on the land, then we're gonna end up with incomplete solutions. If we can tell the stories about the transatlantic slave trade, we sure damn well can tell the stories of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera and how they started the first known trans rights organization in the world. Why can't we tell Marsha P. Johnson's story? If we're gonna do Black History Month, then we need to do it right. Because if you tell an incomplete story, be it about Rosa Parks and her long history of doing organizing against sexual assault, you tell an incomplete story about the LGBTQ movement in this country, then how are we gonna craft full campaigns? We're gonna continue to miss stuff.
Let's go to the next really important moment in the legacy of witch activism. And that comes in the 80s with Marie Kondo. And she wrote I, Tituba, Black Witch of Salem in 1986. And just as The Wonderful Wizard of Oz reframes popular perceptions about who witches were, so did this book, which was using racism and sexism in the Puritan era to talk about racism and sexism in the 80s. And Angela Davis, in the introduction to the book, affirms the importance of Conde's creative work as activism. And she writes, Tituba engages in recurring meditations on her relationship as a Black woman to feminism, and her voice can be viewed as the voice of a suppressed Black feminist tradition, one that women of African descent are constantly reconstituting in fiction, criticism, history, and popular culture.
Black feminist text is sacred text. She's the one who taught me that. And so I open up this with some sacred text from the Combahee River Collective. In the second half of the quote, they say in their statement, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression. And I believe in that.
Just like that.
That's the word.
That's clear.
And it's the truth.
All men,
the light and the way.
All women and all Black people.
And this was just a palate I actually was pretty happy with Elvira the other day when she encouraged her fans to vote against racism and sexism, xenophobia in the midterms. So, Elvira is like starting to become an activist herself, I guess. Man, you should have read those comments. It was rough. But good for you, Cassandra Peterson.
That I loved about Circe is that when we see her in the Odyssey, she's very powerful. And actually, the gods are clearly a little bit nervous of her, but it's not her divine power that they're afraid of. It's her witchcraft. It's the fact that she has literally invented her own power. And it comes out of this skill and knowledge and dedication. It's about, working with potions, working with herbs, saying particular words. It's the opposite of Shazam, which is what, Zeus does. But I have since come to feel that what it really means to be a witch is to be a woman who is wielding more power than society is comfortable with you having. And so I feel that we should all be witches. Even the men should also all be witches.